Welcome to the BOGART Effect, a wealthy wisdom podcast. The following BOGART Effect podcast is intended for general information purposes only. The information discussed is no substitute for personalized investment advice from BOGART or another investment professional. Please see important disclosure information at the end of the presentation. Hi, welcome to the BOGART Effect. This is James Bogart. I've got Morgan Veth with me today. Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
We're going to do my favorite podcast talk, year-end planning.
I can't believe we're here.
I know. It's amazing how fast 2025 has gone, and so much has changed. There's a lot of things that we want to be talking about proactively going into the end of the year, decisions that we're having these conversations one-on-one with clients, but think it's important to make sure that everyone's appropriately addressing. So, I think ultimately we got a lot of things to talk about. Let's kind of break it down into some of the key elements.
Yeah.
Retirement, giving, healthcare, any type of charitable, estate planning things.
In general.
And I think the big headline piece is the One Big Beautiful Bill. It did clarify a lot of things, but it also changed a lot of things.
Only 870 pages of
that's
content.
It?
Yeah.
We're still getting letter rulings. So, whatever was in it is still being clarified. So, more to come.
Only 4 years for this Cure Act.
Yeah.
So it'll be done.
Sorry, that's it. But you're not wrong, right? And some of these are having substantive implications from a planning perspective, especially going into year end. I'd say primarily in the charitable side, but we also have some elements of Secure Act, like the Roth 401k piece for anyone over a certain income level. So let's just dive in. When we're thinking about year end, retirement is probably at the forefront. Contributions, things that we need to be doing. What are you recommending to clients right now?
Yeah. So one thing I say is really important, because this does have that December 31st deadline, is looking at your employer-sponsored plans, your 401k, your 403b, to ensure you're maxing it out. Yep. With your personal retirement accounts, you've got a little bit of wiggle room, right? We have until April to still make contributions, but any of the ones we're talking about today really are, hey, these need to be done by year end. The important thing to note about your 401k is take a look, make sure you're maxing it out. So if you're under 50, that's $23,500 this year. Often with those, when you go in to increase your deferral elections, it takes 1 to 2 payroll cycles. Yep. So this is like, maybe take action and go look at that today.
Bingo.
To make sure you're maxing it out.
The other one that I see too is if you have the ability to save some extra dollars as well, and this is specifically putting after-tax money into the 401k plans, that needs to be done via special contribution. And so you have two ways of getting the after-tax contributions. And one is via payroll deduction. But if you haven't fully maximized that out, then you can actually write an additional check. It's called a special contribution. But that needs to be done by December 15th.
Yes. So if your plan allows it, then getting that. So really any dollars going into that need to count for this year. They need to be done by the end of the year, but even sooner.
Truthfully, we're on the clock now, right, with that one. And just to maybe a little quick tangent, the reason that it matters is if we do the after-tax contribution, the vast majority of plans now allow for tax-paid distributions. So we can do what's called the mega backdoor strategy. I'm not going to take up this podcast to talk about that. But
there's a whole webinar and podcast about that.
Webinar, podcast, blog posts, lots of content about mega backdoors. But that's one where we need to get that in, and December 15th is the cutoff for almost every plan-sponsored 401k, 403b, 457. So get that in. Let's talk a little bit about required minimum distribution planning, and as well as any type of QCDs.
Yeah. Right? So the ones we just mentioned are if you're still accumulating, this is, okay, now I'm retired. Let's talk about what has to come out. There's also a deadline there. So your required minimum distribution, which right now is 73, age 73 is when it starts. That's your required beginning date. Goes up to 75, but you've got to have that money out by December 31st. So you can either take it out by just taking a distribution, right? Pulling it to yourself, or doing a qualified charitable distribution, which is where you send the money directly out into charity.
Bingo.
But either one, they have to be done by December 31st. Yeah.
And so traditional IRAs, we can add them all up and do it just from one of the IRAs. But if you still have remnant 401ks sitting somewhere, that required minimum distribution needs to come directly from that 401k.
You can't aggregate those with your personal.
So just something to be mindful of. By the way, that's just a little quick caveat. Once you're in retirement mode, having outside 401ks can be a little cumbersome from an administrative perspective. It typically will benefit post-retirement to start consolidating and having everything in one place.
Not to mention, you can't do a qualified charitable distribution from an employer-sponsored plan, right? So from a 401k, an old 401k. So that's another compelling reason. If you are charitably inclined, for a lot of our clients, they make sense to do. It keeps that money off your AGI, off your top line. You can't do them from 401ks.
You know what? Just because I know we have time today, what is a qualified charitable distribution?
Yeah, so that's in lieu of your RMD, or you can go above it if you want to. But from your IRA, you're saying, hey, Morgan, I want you to send $1,000 directly to this charitable organization, $1,000 to my church. Any 501c3, it just can't go into a donor advised fund. That's still one of the caveats. But you're able to say, hey, instead of taking it out to myself, claiming it, paying taxes on it, I'm just going to send it directly to charity. It can be a number of charities.
And so just to put some numbers to this, a required minimum distribution, we use RMD all the time, so just for jargon purposes. But let's just say your required minimum distribution is $100,000. That's the required amount that you have to take out of your 401k, IRA. If that $100,000 is all taxable, but what you're saying is you can donate directly to a charity from the IRA and it satisfies the required minimum distribution. So if you give $1,000 to your church, then your $100,000 required amount now becomes $99,000.
Exactly.
Right. So and by the way, you can actually do qualified charitable distributions starting at age 70 and a half, even though your RMDs might not start until age 73. Age 75 if you're over the age of, if you were born 1960 or later. But the point is that this is something that has to be done by year end. You can't do qualified charitable distributions prior to age 70 and a half.
Right.
And I believe the cap's $105,000.
Yeah. So they finally did make it permanent and adjust it for inflation. It's been at $100,000 for a number of years. So,
well, actually forever. I mean, for a long time, they actually didn't give any clarity around qualified charitable distributions until
it wasn't permanent. Every year it's like you got to re-up it.
It's Groundhog Day.
Now it's
here. Now it's permanent. $105,000, husband and wife. So theoretically, you can distribute $210,000 from a traditional IRA and not have that be treated as taxable income. Now, QCDs you don't get a deduction for, to be clear, but it's just reducing the pre-tax accounts by that value. Once you've attained required minimum distribution age, it's satisfying that RMD.
Exactly.
Right? Let's talk about a little bit about Roth conversions, because that's one that also has to be done calendar year.
Correct.
Maybe start with what is a Roth conversion, just for anybody who might not know.
Yeah, I'll give you the quick one. We also have content about it, but that's, hey, I'm intentionally taking money from my IRA, pre-tax dollars, moving it into a Roth IRA. So I'm electing to pay tax on whatever amount. You can choose any amount. And once it's in the Roth, it's now growing tax-free, and you don't have those required minimum distributions that we just mentioned.
So this is a great example where we do a lot of advanced planning. I believe a financial advisor's job is to be able to anticipate what your needs are going to be. We've talked a little bit about required minimum distributions. We have a lot of clients who are fortunate enough that the required minimum distribution is larger than what they're spending. And if you're in that situation, we call it RMD prison. But one of the best ways of mitigating that risk is with doing some proactive planning early on, prior to when the required minimum distributions start with these Roth conversions. But most importantly, it is a December 31, has to be done that calendar year.
Yeah, if we're wanting to take advantage of a low tax year in 2024, whatever number of reasons we might recommend it. We do love using Roths and Roth planning. We got to do it this year.
And I wanted to emphasize, you made a comment, but for any of the outside of your employer plans for contribution purposes, we have until April 15th of next year. So that's not a year-end planning one, but it is something to put on the radar. That if you're going to do, whether it's an IRA contribution or a Roth contribution or a backdoor Roth contribution, that's not a December 31. Yeah, sure, we can get it done, but it really has to be done by April 15th.
It does. And I still recommend and like for clients to do in that calendar year, because if you do it in March, well, you don't have the 5490, you don't have the tax forms, you've got to remember to tell your accountant. So I think it's just cleaner, but you do have some leadway to do it into 2026.
Let's transition, talk a little bit about health plans. We're now in open enrollment time, right?
So for a lot of employers, open enrollments now, or it's coming up. So thinking about and making sure this is a little bit into looking to next year, but again, you got to do it in this open enrollment period to make sure you're optimizing all of the employer benefits that you have. I've seen often clients aren't optimizing all of their employer-sponsored benefit. There's quite a bit that they're offering now. So making sure you're really taking time as you're going through open enrollment right now to do that. Don't just kind of click through, same as last year. Is there anything new? Should I do a health savings account? Really kind of looking at that because the time for those is now.
And health savings versus flex spending, I mean, same conversation essentially, right? We just need to queue it up and be ready to go.
Exactly. Just to make sure what makes sense. For the HSA, obviously you have to have a specific type of health insurance plans. You've got to make sure that makes sense for you and your medical needs and kind of what you forecast there versus a flexible spending. But if you think about an FSA, one important year-end thing, those are use it or lose it.
Yep. That's why I brought it up.
If you have dollars in your FSA, please be looking. There's kind of broad reasons that you can use it. So don't go to the doctor just because, but...
No, but you can buy a gym membership and you can preload your gym membership for the next year or something.
Contact, whatever it might be.
Yep. Classes.
Make sure you're using those dollars by this year. I've seen a couple of times an employer will give you a little bit of a wiggle room in a month or two. Just do it by December 31st. Spend those FSA dollars this year.
Want to change over and talk a little bit about kids, dependents?
Yeah, we know a little bit about this, right? 3 little ones at home for each of us. So for your 529 contributions, so if you are in a state that has state income tax, like here in Virginia, then your contributions need to go in by December 31st to get that tax deduction for December 31st.
And that's a state tax deduction.
That is a state tax deduction. But again, it is time sensitive, so make sure you've done that. I usually recommend doing it earlier in the year, so hopefully you've done it. But if not, if it's kind of waited around, make sure you do it now. There are a few very small handful of states that, again, will let you kind of do it later, early into the next year. Assume you're not one of those. Just do it now.
I mean, most of our clients aren't in those states. Actually, most of our clients don't have state income taxes, so it's or a large percentage don't. But with 529s, these are college savings plans. For anybody who doesn't know, grandpa and grandma can also contribute to these. Again, if you don't have a state tax return, it's not going to have a direct or meaningful impact. Yep. If you're over, I believe it's $250,000 of state income, you're completely phased out anyways. So the deduction piece isn't as significant, but contributions still count on an annualized basis. So you can do $19,000 per husband, per wife, $38,000 a year. And 529s actually have a special provision that allow for 5 years of accelerated contributions. If you're feeling really generous, you can do $190,000 this year into a 529 for one of your grandchildren. And by the way, if you're doing that, that's typically a more of an advanced planning type of work that we're doing, where you really just want to fully fund or materially fund your children or grandchildren's education expenses. Right. So something just to integrate and factor in as we're doing any type of advanced planning.
But if you're eligible for and get that tax benefit, December 31st is your deadline.
Bingo. Yeah. So, and then it resets on January 1st.
Exactly.
So, it's another one of those where meaningful.
Yeah. Can I say one more in regards to a 529 as well? So also if your kids are in college right now, you're utilizing the 529s. So let's say a lot of clients will just kind of pay for tuition, write a checkbook. It's easier, have it come from their bank. But if you want to reimburse yourself from the 529 assets, you also want to do it in that same year.
By the way, just because you said it's not just college anymore.
Right.
For this year, if you have kids or grandkids in private education, you can take up to $10,000 this year. In 2026, it's moving to $20,000. Right. So if you're paying for private education, again, it's usually you just pay it out of payroll or cash flow, and then you reimburse yourself. But that is calendar year.
It is.
And another just caveat, because you triggered me to remember this, if you happen to be fortunate enough to have a child that's on scholarship, well, that's also, you can do a distribution of the equivalent level of the scholarship penalty free.
Yes.
But that is also calendar year.
Exactly.
So dependent upon how much is in these plans, we do want to look at this at a more aggregate level, because it might make sense to do the tax-free distribution from scholarship money simply because we don't want material accumulations in these plans outside of that.
Exactly. Yeah. Very little wiggle room with being able to roll it over. So if you're reimbursing yourself, do it by December 31st.
Bingo. What are some of the things we can do outside for kids, funding outside of 529s in college?
Yes. I mean, one that comes to mind is just your annual gifting, right? For kids of any age. So for a lot of our clients, as part of their estate planning, if we're trying to reduce your estate and just overall transfer of wealth, you can gift your kids up to $19,000 per year, whether that's in the
per person.
Per person, right? Yeah. So whether that's in their 529 or their UTMA if they're younger, or adult kids, just writing them a check, whatever that looks like, that also resets every single year.
Yep.
So that's something to think about. Again, I usually like to do it early in the year. But if that's kind of passed you by, just a reminder to do that by December 31st.
Well, and on the flip side, I'll take the other side of that. Sometimes you want to see how the accounts perform for the year, right, and then you do the gifts. Again, everyone's a little different in that regards. Mm-hmm. While you're doing that, though, my absolute favorite thing is to get money into a Roth account for kids or grandkids, especially if they income qualify. That is one of the most substantive ways of transferring wealth and really helping set the stage for them with some good values around saving.
Exactly.
I'm a big believer in that. And so translating that into English, as Morgan just mentioned, we can give $38,000 per husband and wife to each of the kids. If they have earned income, we can put $7,000 into a traditional IRA. Roth IRA. And if they're over the income thresholds, we do the traditional IRA and we convert it to a Roth, so it's tax-free. That's the backdoor strategy. But that gift has to still be done on an annualized basis. Right. But if you're of the line of thinking where you want to help your kids, and especially if you want to help them save for retirement, which is typically the area that most children are not thinking about from a savings perspective, the putting money into a Roth IRA is the absolute best thing. So of the 38, you carve off 7 goes to the Roth. Now you have, what is the math on that? 31,000 that goes to a brokerage account or whatever else. And that to me is an example where you can start demonstrating values that are important to you, which is savings. What I like to frame is, yes, this is usually done in a bigger estate planning conversation. However, it's one of those where the kids can see the immediate impact early on. Mm-hmm. And you can see what they do, which could then have a cascading effect on some of the other things that you might want to do from an advanced planning perspective in the future.
Right. Are they swiping the 31,000 out? Right.
I was trying to eloquently say it, but if the 31 goes in the account and immediately comes out, then you kind of can tell. And that might also change some of the language we're going to put in the estate documents.
They usually don't, actually. Kids are just like,
I like to frame it when it goes in saying, if you take it out without permission, then it doesn't come back.
Yeah.
Right. That tends to work very, very well from an advanced planning perspective. You had a really creative one you mentioned about UTMAs and stepping up basis.
Yes, it's something they do for even my kids. So for young children, there's a kiddie tax. So there's a certain amount, it's about $1,300, I think, for this year, that is tax-free if they just have unearned income. So just their UTMA, I think dividends, interest. My oldest is 12, so they aren't really working yet, but I actually go in and intentionally step up the basis. So I sell something at a gain, trying to keep that gain around the kiddie tax amount, immediately buy something else. But now that is tax-free.
Bingo. Yeah. So minor optimization, but I thought that was really creative.
End of year. You'll notice take on some gains. The only time I'll tell you to do that.
Yeah. You'll notice with financial advisors, we try to find these little optimizations. Yep. That was a creative one I liked a lot. But perfect segue. Let's talk a little bit about year end for our clients. Some of the investment stuff that we do. Yeah. Just talking about year end planning.
Yeah. So tax loss harvesting. We do it throughout the year. I would say most do it year end. So it's definitely a good year end kind of reminder if you don't have someone professionally doing it for you. And that is, hey, if I have something that is at a loss right now, I'm going to sell it, harvest the loss, take on the loss, and then buy something else. You can't buy the exact same investment, but buy something else for 31 days. And then those losses can either offset capital gains that you already have, or they can go against ordinary income. Up to $3,000.
Up to $3,000. Yeah. Emphasize on the 31 days because there's what's called a wash sale rule. Yep. So if you sell something for a loss and then buy it back within that 31-day period of time, it disallows that loss on your taxes. By the way, that includes a dividend. So if a dividend pays in that window, so just be careful of that. And being deliberate about realizing losses as best you possibly can, simply because we want to use those to offset against gains. 2025 is turning out to be another year where we don't have a lot of losses.
No, but that's also why we do it throughout year end. There were a lot of clients that we did harvest losses in April.
Yep.
Right? So when the market was down, and no, it's not we're intentionally looking to have a loss in the portfolio, but we're going to have something, right, that goes down. And so it's just taking advantage of it while still keeping the money invested. I kind of
describe those losses as like a credit account, right, where you can use to offset against future gains.
Yep. They just keep carrying forward.
Exactly. Which, to your point, it's not that we're doing it intentionally to have losses. We don't want to materialize losses. But at the end of the day, it's another one of these optimizations where you harvest a loss, you can buy something else. It could be a proxy, right? Yep. Like, for example, in our value portfolios, we'll sell individual stocks that have losses and then we'll buy an ETF. It's not the same thing. It's not like kind. Yep. So it allows us to have, the equal level of allocation, but we're not actually owning that specific position. We wait the 31 days, we buy them back. Beautiful.
We've saved just in tax money.
And potentially have a chit going forward. Right. I mean, to offset future gains, which hopefully we have lots and lots and lots of those.
Exactly. The other piece we do too around this time of year is if you own actively managed mutual funds, they tend to pay out capital gains distributions, usually in December. And so we certainly kind of look ahead for our clients because they tell you what they're going to be. Usually around like late November, most mutual fund companies will actually post and say, here's what we estimate our capital gains to be. And so just being mindful of that, it can make sense sometimes to sell out of a fund ahead of it to kind of sidestep if it's going to be a really large distribution. But that's just something else from a tax efficient standpoint to look at.
The mutual funds are the most challenging part of predicting taxes. And that is hands down, I've found to be the largest surprise for clients is these capital gains.
Last year was a big year.
And I suspect 2025 is going to also be a big year. And what I mean by that is a big year in terms of capital gains distributions from these mutual funds. Yeah, I don't want to say it is what it is, but it's definitely something that we can be deliberate and intentional about. The thing is a lot of them have unrealized gains now. So what's worse, right? Like, realize the unrealized gain and pay off of that versus just wait for whatever the capital gains distribution is going to be and continue to hold.
Exactly.
And this is one where I think being deliberate and proactive is extremely important, especially if it's going to impact what you're going to do on charitable giving, right? Yep. Which, perfect segue, let's talk a little bit about year-end charitable. Yeah. So we already talked a little bit about QCDs, the qualified charitable distributions. That's something you're going to do from the IRA accounts. Right. But I think 2025 is presenting a unique opportunity because of the One Big Beautiful Bill. Yep. Let's talk about that and what that means.
Yeah. So there were two kind of notable changes in regards to charitable giving as part of the tax bill. And so one of those starts in 2026. And that is for anyone who's itemizing. So they're able to take advantage of their charitable distributions. They introduced a floor. There's a hurdle now for the first time, and it's 0.5% of your AGI. So to think about it, let's say in 2026, your adjusted gross income or AGI is $100,000. So your charitable contributions, the first $500, you don't get to deduct that on that year's taxes. Now it carries forward to future years, but you're not deducting the first $500. So for a lot of our clients who are charitably inclined, that's pretty impactful, especially if they have a high adjusted gross income. So again, since it's going into effect in 2026, I've been advising a lot of clients we're kind of front loading and doing some larger charitable contributions this year where they can get the most tax impact from it.
So let's translate that into like what that really means in actionable items, right? So we can donate up to 30% of our adjusted gross income with stocks. Yep. And then we can donate 60% with cash. Yep. So keep using your example of $100,000 of income. That means we can donate $30,000 worth of highly appreciated stock, $60,000 if you want to do cash.
Exactly.
Very charitable, right? In those examples. But the point is that you would then have the first 500 would not be eligible, but let's say we do the 30,000 of stock. That means the deduction is 29,500, right?
Right. Yeah. Next year.
Sorry. Thank you. Yeah.
Next year. This year it's the full.
This year you can do the full amount. So, again, it leads to potential the conversation around accelerating charitable deductions. We love donor advised funds. They're very economical ways of donating large chunks of highly appreciated stock into a charitable account. And then you can disperse the funds at your desire. There's no obligation from a donation perspective, a disbursement perspective. But the year you put the money in, you get the deduction. So you're capped at the numbers I was just saying. So the 30% for stock, 60% for cash. But it allows you to take a larger deduction in 1 year. And especially if you're in the situation where you're going to itemize. By the way, at this point, the only people I'm seeing itemize are those that are charitably inclined. Yeah. I mean, if just with the caps on SALT and
People refinance in 2020.
I know.
So mortgage
all these
interest is
low cheap mortgage
right?
interest. Like it's not enough to get people there. They usually have to donate some number to get above the standard deductions.
Yeah.
Right. So, and just to emphasize, this is another one of these year-end December 31s.
Exactly.
We respectfully ask all clients to get these done by December 15th.
Ideally.
It's just from an administrative processing side.
I maybe took calls like December 28th last year for clients doing it, but earlier better.
Yeah. No, but related to this point, obviously there's an optimization here based upon future law in 2026. But I'll just say personal opinion, anyone who donates, and whether you're itemizing or not, if you have a highly appreciated position in a security, you should donate the security, not cash.
Oh, absolutely.
But again, this is so frequently under-optimized situation where I see a client where, whether it's their children's school or church, local charities, and they're writing checks, but they have a whole bunch of positions that are highly, highly appreciated. Mm-hmm. So translating this, and by the way, you have to own the stock for over a year in order to be able to do this. But even if you want to donate $100, if you have a stock position that's worth, I'll just make it easy. Say it's worth $100, but its cost basis is $15. So you have $85 of unrealized gains. Well, in that situation, if you needed the cash, you'd have to sell the position. You're going to pay long-term capital gains on the $85 of unrealized gain. And then you're going to write the check for $100. So really, you're having to sell more than $100 worth of the stock position in order to be able to get the $100, right? Whereas the charity doesn't pay taxes. So if you donate that position, you get the benefit of the donation at the $100.
Yep.
And that $85 of unrealized gains is essentially absolved because of the donation into the charity.
Yeah, you're not like pushing the tax burden to them. I think that's a concern. It's not. It's a win-win.
Bingo. And so this is a great example. And I think whether you itemize or not, if you have highly appreciated positions, give away the position.
Absolutely.
And then use cash to buy it back. So this is what my wife and I do every single year. I move money over into a donor advised fund. Mm-hmm. And if I still want to own that same position, I just put cash back into the account. I buy it.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah. I just stepped up the cost basis with using charitable giving.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic way year end, again, because these things need to go into the donor advised fund within the calendar year. That's another reason why we love the donor advised funds.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, and I would say, so the tax bill isn't like overhauling what we're doing, but it is worth being mindful about it because a lot of clients are already doing year end giving. They're utilizing the donor advised fund, but most have really welcomed the conversation I've been having the past month or two to say, hey, there's a change next year. If you know you're going to gift, let's go ahead and just front load it into 2025.
Perfect segue, just real quickly. There's a lot of things changing in 2026 related to the One Big Beautiful Bill. And frankly, as we mentioned earlier on, I know we were joking, but there are still clarifications coming from that.
Yeah.
But like, for example, we know that the state and local property tax exemption is going from $10K up to $40K, but there's an income phase out. So dependent upon what we're doing from a strategy perspective, we could absolutely be disallowing some of that higher level on the state and local property taxes. Similar, right? There's the senior citizen additional deduction, but that also has an income phase out, right? Yep. So it's like, do we want to penalize ourselves from advanced planning work that we need to be doing at a bigger level that's going to have a very substantive impact in order to get some of these deductions?
Yep.
Right. So this is where I think the integration of long-term strategy plan coming into some of this year-end planning related work is imperative.
And we have the infrastructure to test that for a client. So in other words, it's beyond the conversation. We do have the capability to say, hey, I can run a tax pro forma this year that shows us what if we do the charitable giving. I can also look at 2026. So if your income otherwise is fairly stable, we know what it's going to be, then we can kind of show you and kind of mock up what if it's 2026 versus 2025 to really kind of show you what's more advantageous.
Absolutely. Yeah, and this is where, again, obviously we're biased because we're a financial advisory firm, but I do believe the value of an advisor is the integration, planning, investments, tax, estate planning, trust. All of those things need to be factored in as you're building out your long-term financial plan. Morgan, This was a great discussion. Looking forward to a great 2026.
Thank you.
The previous presentation by Bogart Wealth was intended for general information purposes only. No portion of the presentation serves as the receipt of or as a substitute for personalized investment advice from Bogart Wealth or any other investment professional of your choosing. Different types of investments involve varying degrees of risk, and it should not be assumed that future performance of any specific investment or investment strategy or any other non-investment related or planning services discussion, or content will be profitable, be suitable for your portfolio or individual situation, or prove successful. Neither Bogart Wealth's investment advisor registration status nor any amount of prior experience or success should be construed that a certain level of results or satisfaction will be achieved if Bogart Wealth is engaged or continues to be engaged to provide investment advisory services. Bogart Wealth is neither a law firm nor accounting firm, and no portion of its services shall be construed as legal or accounting advice. No portion of the podcast content should be construed by a client or prospective client as a guarantee that he or she will experience a certain level of results if Bogart Wealth is engaged or continues to be engaged to provide investment advisory services. Copies of Bogart Wealth's current written disclosure brochure and Form CRS discussing our advisory services and fees are available upon request or at www.bogartwealth.com.